Welcome to the Everything Yachting YouTube channel. Our goal is to help yacht buyers, yacht owners, and yacht sellers through interesting, educational, and informative discussions on topics that are anything and everything yachting related. Hello again. Thank you for joining us today on Everything Yachting. We want to bring content that you find valuable if you are interested in boating on a diesel-powered motor yacht. I brought one of our insurance experts here, longtime associate. I can't tell you how many boats Jerry Norman with Novamar has insured for Marlow Marine, but it's countless in my eyes. He's made a lot of my customers very happy. There's been good days and bad days on boats. You know, things go great, things go wrong. And Jerry's been there through and through to help our customers get through whatever that insurance issue was. So if you are in anywhere USA wanting to get into boating, have had a boat on your lake for a long time, but have always dreamed about getting out there and exploring the 7 seas, going down island, going wherever your dreams are, you might want to have insurance on your boat, and you might have some questions about it. So we're not going to cover everything today. We're going to cover what we think might be one of your questions. And if you have a question, we're going to put Jerry's cell phone information on this video, email information as well as mine, and we're here to serve. Let us know how we can help you out. So Jerry, I'd like to start with getting everybody to know you a little bit. How did you get into the yachting industry? How did you end up here?
Sure. Thanks, Eric. Appreciate that. And thanks for having me. You know, I started out really in boating since I was 10 years old. And that goes way back to learning how to sail in the prams. That was out in California. And racing. Grew up sailboat racing and went through college years, high school years racing sailboats, and had a little success. Did a couple national championships back in the day.
Good for you.
Just don't ask the years on those. But
where in California?
Southern California was
Okay.
where I did most of my racing, and then spread out around the country from there.
So I was in Southern California in the late 90s in the Marine Corps, and I didn't get to do any sailing, unfortunately.
Okay.
So
Camp Pendleton.
yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I was just up the road in Newport Beach.
Okay. All right.
So our paths were near.
Yeah. All right.
Very good.
So you did some cruising, did some sailing, all right?
So did that, and then after college I went into the shipping industry, so commercial lines with the large shipping companies. Did that for about 10 years, and then this opportunity came up with a buddy of mine who I've known for since I've been 18 years old.
Okay.
His dad owned an insurance agency, a marine insurance agency, so we talked. It was a great time to come on board, and we the hire was, and the directive was to start a Florida office. It's a California agency, but the directive was to hire or start a Florida office, which we did in 2002, and have been doing that ever since up until the present time.
So you moved to Florida in 2002?
Yes, sir.
I moved here in 2001.
Did you really?
Yeah.
It's a great move. Really happy we did it.
My first day of checkout of the Marine Corps was September 11th, 2001. I had been living overseas for 5.5 years.
Wow.
Japan, Denmark, and El Salvador. And I was checking out. And the first day of the first week of teaching this Marine how to be a U.S. civilian again.
Right.
I was there at 8:30 in the morning, and by 8:45, 9 o'clock, we all know what happened. It changed the world.
Oh,
and
my goodness.
It was a punch in the face for an early 20-year-old trying to figure out what to do in life at that time.
No doubt.
Didn't even fly to Florida, okay, because it was really scary at that time.
Sure.
Rented a car with another buddy. He was going to one state. I dropped him off, and I kept on going, and that's how I got to Florida.
That was a good way to get to Florida in those days, Eric. Yeah.
For sure. For sure. So you moved here shortly after that?
Yep. May of 2002.
And where's your office at?
We're downtown Sarasota, Ringling and Orange, and from that office we handle all Florida and all the Southeast, really. We're the Southeast regional office for Novamar.
Okay. And Novamar is the same company that your buddy's dad owns or your buddy owns now?
It is. It was a partnership, and the partnership split in 2013. And so I am with my friend who I've always been with. So family-owned agency that parted ways at that time. But Novamar was actually founded by my friend in 1987 out of Seattle.
And how does that relationship and tenure give you a competitive advantage against some other people who'd be knocking on our door, quite
Sure.
honestly, to insure our customers' boats?
Sure. Yep. Yeah, and good question. And really the difference, what Novamar brings to the table for marine insurance and for boat owners is really a combination of marine and boating experience coupled with the insurance experience. So we're boaters first and foremost. We grew up with it. Almost all of us at Novamar are boaters, so we know what happens on the water. We know about boats, so and we obviously know about insurance. So those two things coupled bring a strength to the table for the customer that somebody who knows insurance but then is learning boats from a desk doesn't have. Be the practical experience, and the practical experience will allow us to identify gaps in coverage or needs that would not be normally identified. A lot of that has to do with where a boat might be, navigation, for instance, paid crew liability, when you need those liabilities, and liabilities in different jurisdictions in different waters. They vary. So those are things that we bring to the table, can identify for our customers that they may not be identified properly if it was a more general lines agency, I guess you might say.
So I'll pick one thing out of that conversation and dive deep on it, right? So you mean to say I've had a boat in the Great Lakes for a long time, and Tommy, with whoever insurance agency that insures my cars and my house, has insured my boats. And I sold my business and I'm ready to get my Marlow or get my whatever boat, and I'm going to go to the islands, right? But I don't know where I'm going to go, when, or whatever. So I'm going to buy that boat in my locale, right? So I find my boat on the Great Lakes. Good. I call up my guy, I get my insurance, and he answers my questions, I answer his, and I'm covered. And now I hop on my boat and I want to go, right? Are you telling me that maybe because not enough questions were asked, I might go outside of the boundary of the insurance that I have?
It's very possible. There are many policies that are written on just a general USA Canadian coastal waters definition of territory, which gives you all that territory. But if you're coming down and you're coming out into the ocean, some of those policies have offshore limits, 50 miles, 75 miles. If you're going to the islands and that hasn't been addressed, you could go out of your limits offshore. Or even if the offshore extends and you go to the island, say it's the Bahamas, I'm going to the Bahamas. And everybody thinks of the Bahamas, Turks and Caicos. So you go out there, you're in the Bahamas, you may go down to the Turks and Caicos. Some policies will split the difference between the Turks and Caicos and the Bahamas. So if you just say Bahamas coverage, you may have a policy that just limits you to Bahamas. And if you're down in the Turks and Caicos, you're going to be uncovered. Or we've actually had this happen where somebody's coming down, they come out of the Gulf, they're in the Gulf of Mexico, and they're planning their trips. They go to the Yucatan, which is in the Gulf of Mexico if you stay along the Cancun, that type of area, or Progreso. And they've been down there for a month. They come back and they call us, hey, they want to check their insurance, or they want to look at something maybe more competitive. And we ask them where they've just been. We've been down to the Yucatan. We get a copy of their policy and it says U.S. coastal waters and Gulf of Mexico. It sounds like they're covered, but they're not, because it's in international waters. They've gone into Mexico. You would need actually to do either a trip endorsement or a Caribbean endorsement that includes Mexico to have that coverage. And they're surprised to know they didn't have coverage for the last month or so. So, yep, that can easily happen.
So that's kind of scary.
It is.
Because nobody wants to lose coverage on their insurance. So
especially unknown.
Right. So I can see I've sold my business. I found my boat. I bought my boat. Or I'm buying my boat and I got to answer some questions. Where are you going to go? Well, I don't really know where I'm going to go yet. So let's fast forward and say we're in our backyard. I'm in Florida. Okay. I'm on the West Coast. I live on the West Coast of Florida. Where am I going to go? Well, I'm probably going to go to Key West. Let's just pretend I'm not ready to go to Mexico, but I say I want to go to the Bahamas, and that's really it.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
When I'm ready and I want to change my mission, how do I go about making sure that I don't get outside of coverage of that area? How much notice do you need? Is there a chance if I said I want to go to Maine? that I wouldn't be able to get coverage if I have coverage down here? You know,
Yeah.
how does it all work? And what do you need?
All of those things are possible, and that's a great question, because these things can be overlooked. So you can end up with, and that's part of our job, is to really elicit that out of you. So if insured calls and they're new to this, or they're not sure where they're going, we will ask the questions. Are you looking to go to Bahamas this year? Do you have a trip planned within the next, say, 6 months or 12 months? No, I just might go sometime. And in that case, we let them know, maybe best you can leave Bahamas off. If you're just going to be in Florida, you can go Florida coastal navigation, or if you're going up north with the boat and coming back to Florida, we're going to go U.S. navigation and not necessarily have Bahamas in there for you. Or if you do have a trip planned, I'm not going to the end of my policy term, which is 12 months. Probably say, let's get it added in so you don't end up going and forgetting that it's there.
So this is a 12-month cycle that we're really talking about.
So
I have to forecast where I'm going to be this 12 months from policy start date to policy end date.
Yep, in a loose fashion. And so you want to look at those 12 months so you're not going to miss anything in there. And we'll also ask questions if people are thinking about going offshore or cruising or going to the islands down in the future. You know, that second year, third year, and even fifth year. Some people will buy a boat. It'll be on the market now. It's a good opportunity to purchase, because the right boat doesn't necessarily come up every single year. So they'll buy even in advance with a plan. We're going to do the Caribbean in year 4 and 5. So what we want to do is place with a company that will house them where they are, but then also potentially has the option to do the Caribbean, or we'll let them know which companies absolutely can't do the Caribbean, so they know when they come to do it, they need to contact us so we can get them with a company that will. And they have time to place with that company, so the requirements can be met. They may need a survey or so forth. So we ask those questions down the line to avoid having to jump companies, having to get a survey, or maybe a survey a month before they're having to go and the company is requiring it, put them under the gun.
Why would I need another survey if I bought my boat recently, had it surveyed, gave that to you or insurance company, it was checked off on? What instance triggers another survey?
Yep. It'd be the age of the boat. So if you bought a brokerage boat and maybe you're a 15-year-old brokerage boat or a 10-year-old brokerage boat, and you got a survey when you bought it, in 5 years, typically companies will need a survey within a certain period of time. Some within 3 years, some within 5 years, some even go as far as 10 years. So it depends on the company. So, and that's part of our job is, hey, you're with a company that's the best fit for you, but there's going to be a 5-year survey increment. So therefore, if you're heading offshore and we need to change a company for you at that point, we want to make sure that you know that and you have plenty of time to get that survey in advance.
Once I'm bound, I'm kind of good for 12 months as long as I stay in my agreed box.
Yeah.
And then do I have automatic renewals, or would the insurance company maybe decline me even with no claims?
No, typically not. You would have your renewal. So the renewal would come in as a renewal offer. You get to view it. Those typically come out 35 to 45 days in advance of your renewal. So there's plenty of time to look at it, make changes, make adjustments, tailor that to your new year. And that's, again, a conversation that we have with clients, so we can properly fit them for that coming year. The renewal can be adjusted. We get the adjusted renewal to the client, and then they go ahead and make the payment and go ahead with your new year.
Mm-hmm. Do you have a busy time of the year that is bad? You know, like my tax man, I can't call him in certain months. But...
There are some busy times. Yep. Yeah, it's cyclical. Busiest times really more or less for the East Coast yacht market and yacht insurance market really are going to be April, May, June. Okay. Those are your busiest months. So a lot of business happens there. People buy boats. They're getting them ready for the season. So busy months there. A tip for Florida insureds is if you can have your insurance, if you can avoid it, it's best to have your insurance renew or your effective date outside of storm season. So in storm season, from the insurance standpoint, is 1 June to 1 November. And that's how the underwriters look at it. From a weather standpoint and from NOAA, it actually goes to 30 November, but the insurance industry typically cuts off storm season at 1 November.
So I'm during my renewal period. I've got 30 days. You just gave me that renewal notice, and there's a storm coming, and my boat's at my house. I'm insured to be at my house, but there's a storm coming. Does that monkey with my renewal process at all?
Not with your actual company, but if you are shopping companies, it may, because the companies will put up binding restrictions. If there's an active storm that's approaching Florida, for instance, if there are boats in Florida, they can put up a date moratorium, is what it's called.
Does it have to be named, or can it just be any storm that they decide?
It can be numbered or named. So that moratorium can start from when they number these, which is a depression. So a tropical depression number 3, for instance, they can put up a moratorium, and then that would last all the way through the cycle, through the naming cycle, to its peak, and then also to its downturn. And companies can keep those moratoriums up. If it's a severe storm that damages an area, they can keep a moratorium up for a week, 2 weeks, even a month or longer. And they do that for a lot of reasons, but so it can really lock you out of shopping or looking at options during storm season. Okay. Something to keep an eye on.
And if I'm a cash buyer, do I need to have insurance?
No, there's no requirement, no law that says you have to have insurance. It's in practical purposes, you kind of do, in that it's very difficult to get a vessel serviced without insurance. So boat yards, repair facilities, marinas, and so forth, places you check into, they'll ask to see a copy of your insurance. Many boat yards won't service a vessel without insurance, so they want to see that certificate before they even touch the boat or pull the boat.
Mm-hmm. Those are all educational answers, and I really appreciate it. You're doing great, like you always have. Oh. You have the answers to my questions. You have the answers to my clients' questions, and I appreciate your dedication to the industry and professionalism. I really do.
Thank you.
State of the industry today. When I started the industry, insurance wasn't an obstacle to boat purchase, really.
Right.
Other than, hey, bud, you're going like 30 feet bigger than you ever run. Do you think that's a good idea?
Right.
You know, I mean, that generally was our limiting factor. Today, we're talking about locations. We're talking about captain requirements. We're talking about dollar values. What's changed, and why are we in whatever we're in now? Mm-hmm. And how do we get out of this?
Yeah, and it's changed a lot. Your observations are spot on. We have seen that a drastic change in the yacht insurance markets. Florida is the hardest hit in that change, and it started right around 2017 with
what states would be next in line? Just somebody that may not ever come to Florida. What are some other trouble areas?
Some other states, really any state that's really they call it cat exposed, so exposed to a catastrophic loss, which is typically hurricane from a boat standpoint. So primarily the Carolinas, Florida, and the Gulf Coast. So going on across to Mississippi, Louisiana, Texas. Those are your most affected states. Florida is the tightest among those, and people key on Florida because we are cat exposed. The hurricanes do come in here, obviously, but also what Florida has going against it is exposure. There are more boats in the state of Florida than any state in the country.
We've got a lot of boats here, a lot of boat business.
This is where people want to be. The water's beautiful, boating is great. This is where
Bahamas,
the boats
Keys, Mexico, if you want.
You can't beat it. You can't beat it. So because of that, the insurance companies, by design, if they had their way in the world, they would have an even number of boats spread across all the states in even numbers and even values.
They put a poker chip on every one.
That's exactly right. The same bet on each one. And then they're loving it. They're sleeping well. Right. Unfortunately, reality is not like that. So in Florida, what they have to do is they've got to manage their exposure. They've got reinsurance contracts to negotiate that are more expensive and harder to get than any other state because that's a capacity issue in bringing that capacity to the market to handle the exposure that's on their books. So Florida is the tightest market, and it's unique among all those states. And the state of the market, really, this current market really started in 2017 with the hurricanes that came through there. Irma was the main one that hit Florida. There were two others, Maria that year, and I think it was Harvey that hit Texas, so they call it HIM. So those three storms, they devastated the Caribbean yachting markets, all the charter fleets, all the Caribbean boats. There were losses in the billions. It was the highest loss ever for yachts. And the Caribbean is important to us because the reinsurers and the insurers in the Caribbean, people backing those policies, they're the same reinsurers that back the Florida boats. So it was hit very, very hard. And so what happened there was high losses in yacht And they were so high that actually raised in the insurance actuaries' analysis the vulnerability and the unprofitability of the yacht business, which has traditionally always been buried in what they call just marine. And marine is commercial. So marine is the ships, cargo carriers, bulk carriers, it's your barges, it's all of that stuff. And yacht was always buried in there. And marine has been profitable in many years. There's been no issue. But inside marine, yacht, even before 2017, has been unprofitable many, many years. So that actually raised that statistic with the actuaries. So then the directive was from the reinsurers that boat insurance needs to stand on its own. They peeled it out. They peeled it out. And that's where the reinsurers saw this. They left the market, and that's largely the UK carriers and Lloyd's of London, which that change is historic because London, they started marine insurance back in the 1600s. They started the whole game. This is the first time London has pulled out, and they pulled out almost exclusively from writing boat insurance back in 2017.
In the CAT areas or worldwide, or
in the CAT areas, so Caribbean, Florida, southeastern U.S. The Mediterranean wasn't affected as much, the U.S. East Coast and so forth, but the CAT prone areas, Lloyd's essentially stopped writing that line of business. And that was historic because that's never happened before.
So what can somebody do who wants a luxury motor yacht? What can they do? Is there an age of vessel that they should narrow in on? Newer, older, price point, quality? What are some things that somebody who wants to go boating, East Coast, Bahamas, down island, wherever, what are some things they can do to help increase their odds of a yes for coverage for insurance?
Sure. Yep.
In today's market.
Yeah, in today's market. And very good question there. And a lot of factors there, what they can bring to the table when you're looking to buy a boat or you're looking for your plans. Generally, newer is better. Quality is better, meaning quality manufacturer, and then your experience that you're bringing to the table. So, and your experience can be,
and let's just throw some numbers out. Newer being what? X year and newer is
with different companies out there.
2000?
Yep, 10 years old and newer.
Okay, so 10 years or newer.
Yep.
Okay.
10 years and newer. Not making big size jumps between what you've owned in the past versus what you're purchasing.
Is that 10 feet, 15 feet, 20 feet?
10 to 15 feet. That's considered probably a maximum jump. Over that, that's going to make the underwriters...
As the insured operator?
As the insured operator, correct. Yep. And if you're buying a large vessel,
what defines large?
Large vessel is going to be somewhere between 65 to 70.
65 plus.
Yep, okay. 65 plus. And over.
And is that waterline length, LOA?
It's going to typically be, they're going to use LOA.
Okay.
They're going to use LOA. And this is specific to the Florida market. This is not as stringent or as hard looked at in the Northeast or the Great Lakes or the West Coast.
So if I want to be in Florida outside of hurricane season and I'm fine being north, does this math problem go away?
It goes away to a certain extent. So if you're going to be in Florida during the summer, in the winter time, and then up north in the Great Lakes or the Northeast in the summers, that's called the north-south vessel, and that will lessen that requirement.
And what if I'm going to have a captain or I'm going to put my boat in hurricane storage in Florida?
Yep.
Does that also lessen?
It is. Those are options that will help underwriters write the risk. So if you're going to use a captain on that vessel, that's going to be a help. And what they're looking for with the captain is a redundancy of protection or care for the vessel. And it's not just hurricanes. There's a lot of things going on with vessels. So you got hurricanes, vessel oversight, somebody in attendance with the vessel, and this is the higher value vessels in the vessel 65 and over. Fires have been a big factor these last 5-6 years. A lot of fires. So if there's somebody in attendance to the vessel,
is there a root cause the insurance industry's identified that people can take extra precautions to look for to make sure I don't have gasoline in my engine room or whatever it is?
Yep. There's not a specific thread, I don't think, because you'll see it. You can see it on new boats. Yep, you can see it on older boats. Something though to look out for would be chargeable toys. So
I've heard about that too.
Your chargeable
lithium ion.
Toys, yep. The toys that are battery powered, the surfboards, all that type of stuff. If you've got those on board, don't leave them on board with the vessel unattended. Or
is that onboard charging or onboard at all? Is there a rule there or guidance?
I would say probably I'd tip that toward charging, but I think on board is something you want to be very careful with those. Okay. Yeah, and not keep them on board, not store them aboard.
So I had a client who had I don't remember if it was hip, knee, or ankle injury, but he was a pretty extreme gentleman, and he loved to ride those little hoverboards.
Yeah.
Now I've got the one that's kind of like a surfboard, what it's called a one wheel, and I can ride that around. I love to go get my trash. It's fun to go up there and come back. But he had the one that was kind of more like a unicycle.
Yeah.
Right. I never really learned to ride that like he did, but I remember he was washing his boat one day while it was charging, and it got a little bit of water on it. And like 3 hours later, that sucker caught on fire, and they ended up just kicking it in the water. That was the easiest way to put it out. And they were afraid it was going to damage the side of the boat.
Sure.
So even just a little bit of moisture in that thing can set it off. I don't know what brand it was or how much water or whatever. I think it was all fresh water too, not even salt water. But when they get going, it's hard to put them out.
Yeah, they create their own. They create their own fuel. They don't actually need the oxygen. They're actually burning from within themselves. And you could. There's been instances where people empty fire extinguishers on these things, and they keep coming back.
Right. Yeah. Right. I think there was a super yacht that was recently lost because of one of those things.
Yeah.
A brand new one.
Yeah. Yep. We've seen them. Yeah. We get alerts from fires all around the world, and it's almost. I'm going to say the frequency of something large catching fire is every 10 to 15 days somewhere in the world.
Wow.
Yeah. Wow. It's pretty frequent. So that's a reason why some of the underwriters are looking at captains on these larger vessels to have eyes on them to mitigate that type of loss. And the thing on the larger vessels that are 2, 3, 5 million in value, the challenge from an underwriter standpoint in writing that line of business is if they've got a book of business that's whatever it is, their total premium count is 25 million or 30 million, whatever that is, and they get a loss of a $5 million vessel, the shock to their book is great because they've got fewer higher value units, and you get one loss, it's a bigger shock to that book. So they're trying to mitigate those. They call them shock losses. That's what they're trying to do with the captain information, or that having a captain aboard a vessel. Because that's a very difficult thing actuarially for the companies to predict. They get 2 or 3 of those, that book could be in jeopardy of getting pulled by the company. As it's when you get a loss on a $5 million boat, it's not just the boat that you have a loss on. You're going to pay $5 million on the boat. Then there's the salvage and the wreck removal. They got to remove the wreck. Then there's the pollution and the cleanup. And that's another separate $5 million coverage involved in that. So if you have a $5 million boat and you add those things up and the liability, if you burn some boats to the side of you, or somebody passes away, unfortunately that can happen. You multiply that out, that $5 million boat loss could easily be a $25-30 million claim.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, let's knock on some wood and hope we don't ever see any of that.
Yes, sir.
Is there anything that quality manufacturers can do to build a boat that helps reduce some of those expenses or costs, or insurance, non-insurable, in certain areas? Is there anything that you found with Marlow's as an example that we've done that help you get people coverage where maybe they couldn't have some way with something else?
Yeah, there is. And the companies look at the type of vessel, sort of the profile of the vessel, more displacement versus a planing vessel, a higher quality build versus more of a production and a quicker build type of vessel. So a boat like a Marlow, which it will plane obviously, but a lot of people will use them at slower speeds, and they're very moderate vessels, quality build. It's a vessel that underwriters will look to write. They like the profile of vessel, and they like the profile of insured that the Marlow attracts. It's a quality vessel. People appreciate that. That's why they purchase them. And that package, with the insured being knowledgeable about boats, with the quality of vessel that they're purchasing, that will create a better risk profile than something that's maybe bought more quickly and more the production line type of risk. So this vessel will get better consideration from a company and underwriters, and from a premium standpoint, than would something that is not as special or as yacht quality, and it's having to do with the whole package, insured and vessel together.
Well, that's great news. That's great news. What would you tell the guy who's got a deep insurance relationship with his business and his assets? He's never owned a boat like this, and he wants to take it wherever he hasn't been before. He calls me. We talk about the price. We're ready to go. We talk about insurance. He says, yeah, I'm going to call Tommy because he takes care of all my assets back home. What guidance would you say if you were able to speak with him before he got too far with Tommy, where maybe having a marine specialist in salt water in the Bahamas might add value? You know,
right.
where do you come in to add value in that instance? Because that happens to me several times a year.
It does, and somebody buying a boat of this type and level, they've had businesses, they've had their own property, they've got a lot of things going on, they've got a relationship with somebody, they've got a lot of insurance, and we've worked in that realm as well. And really, it goes back to that one of those earlier questions in what's the advantage of working with a marine agent versus a general lines agent? And it would be in identifying those gaps that could really be present for a higher end client, and that could be very create a lot of exposure for that higher end client. For instance, crewing, like crew liability. If you say, okay, I've got a captain on board, and a mate, okay, I'm going to get you paid crew coverage. Well, you want to have a deeper conversation on that. You have paid crew, you have your full-time captain, and you got a mate. And the proper question there really is full-time captain, you've got how many part-time crew, and how many paid crew would you have on the boat at maximum at any one time? So he might have two regular crew, a full-time and a part-time, but when he does entertaining, he brings some people on board, they're gonna have an event.
But what if I'm an owner-operator? Most of our Marlow owners are owner-operators. How does that paid crew come into play if they're just using the captain to deliver the boat from wherever to wherever because they've got a business event and they can't get there, but they want to fly into their boat? Does that qualify into that?
Sure.
Do they need to have that coverage?
It does. Yep. And that's something that we talk with the owner operators about as well. Will you ever have a captain assist you with the vessel? Most people, the answer is yes, at some point. It just makes sense to be able to bring somebody on board. And in that case, even if it's a 2-hour assist in one policy term, you want that paid crew coverage on board. So for instance, a $3 million Marlow or a $2 million Marlow, you're going to want $2 million in liability. And you've got your liability built into the policy, but then you want that line item for paid crew to say $2 million. If it doesn't say that and you bring that guy in for just 2 hours even, and he has an injury, he has a slip and fall, whatever it might be, and he gets to an attorney who talks to him about the situation, he can claim against the owner, and the owner would have no liability protection, be exposed to that whole claim.
So it seems like it's very case by case, and you have the answers to the questions. So we just got to make sure that if you're looking at buying a boat that's a nice, high quality diesel powered motor yacht, that you're talking to somebody who understands the market and understands the questions to ask, so you get the right coverage.
That's exactly correct. That's exactly correct. We ask a lot of questions. We get a lot of responses that we put the picture together, and then that helps us cover those gaps for that particular client. And somebody who doesn't have the marine, they will miss a lot of those nuances, and they might have the paid crew coverage, but they didn't ask him about bringing the extra crew on board for an event. And he's going to have another hand, and he's going to have a stew and a chef. So now he's going to have 4 paid crew on the boat for an event. He's got to have paid crew coverage to 4. Otherwise, if one of them gets hurt, he's going to be exposed.
Anything pre-purchase a buyer should do to help improve their position for getting insurance? Some things, and how far out do they need to be talking to you?
Sure. Yep. And that's a good question, and it's something that they can actually do on a proactive basis. So if you're looking to purchase a boat, and if you're looking to purchase a Marlow, and the build is whatever it is, it's 18 months or whatever the case might be, you've got a window there to actually do some things that are going to help you owner operate that vessel. So the best thing you can bring to the table in being an owner operator is experience. So owning boats, then stepping up in size to the vessel that you're purchasing.
Does a captain's license qualify as experience?
A captain's license does. It doesn't qualify as a full-time captain, which would be a separate full-time captain in addition to the owner, but it does lend experience and credence to the owner operator in that he's gone through that training, he's got the sea time, and he brings that license to the table. It gives the underwriter an assurance that there's also it's a higher level of commitment by that owner to his pastime.
So if I'm trying to go 17 feet larger than what I had before, do you think a captain or non-captain would maybe make that difference?
It could. Yep.
No, I don't mean hired. I mean, if I had a captain, which I do have a captain's license, but
sure,
would that make that difference, do you think?
It could. So it could tip the scales from, say, an underwriter saying, yeah, we're going to write this as an owner operator boat, or we're not. So if there's a little bit of a gray area, and that's again where we come in as a marine insurance specialist, we'll go ahead and elicit that client's, get his whole boating information, all his experience. So his ownership, his operational experience, anything else he brings to the table that might have some supporting skill sets. Pilots, for instance, we see a lot of pilots. It does help. It helps with a good number of underwriters. There's a lot of common skill sets. Obviously, you got navigation, you got weather, you got a lot of the instrumentation is actually somewhat similar.
Trip planning,
all of that. Yep. So that all comes into play. So we'll bring all that to the table and then provide that. And sometimes that subjective information, whether it doesn't meet the actual criteria from an objective standpoint, as in checking boxes, but the subjective will tip it over to a yes. And a boat like this with a Marlow is underwritten by marine underwriters. None of these vessels are written by a matrix system. Like if you go to a very basic, like Progressive is a matrix rating, they've got everything all programmed in with their logarithms, and you put the numbers in and it puts the number out. But these boats are written by true underwriters, so that subjectivity can make the difference. So just going back to your original question, what somebody can do to put themselves in a better position would be the ownership and stepping up in size. A captain's license holding is good, or if they want to get one in the interim while the boat's being built, that's certainly good. Operational experience, if they are able to charter, or maybe they can assist in a delivery of a similar boat, or a couple deliveries.
So I was biting my tongue for this question, and I think you just kind of answered it a little bit. So I've got a guy, he's owned a 27 footer, right? And he's super confident in that 27 footer, and he liquidated whatever, and now he's ready to buy that 60 footer.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, he's run with Cousin Joey on the 45. He's run with Grandpa Joe on the 65. Aunt May had the 150.
Yeah.
What does he put down as his number, and how?
Yeah. So with him, he would put down his ownership. So he's got the 27, and then we would fill out his resume with all his operational experience. We would put all of that in there.
And how's that work? Because if Tommy was running the boat, but I was sitting next to him, do I get to count that?
Typically what we would do is get into sort of the details on that. Was it a day trip? Was it 2 hours out, 2 hours back, or something like that? Or did he operate these boats? Did he go with 4 people on an 82 back and forth to the Bahamas? If a boat like that with that number of crew, you're going to be involved in the operation of the boat.
Can count, it sounds like.
It can count.
And how do we prove that? Does the owner of the boat need to sign off on my application, or do I sign off on my own saying that I was there?
You sign off on your own typically. It's a statement of good faith, and the coverage is predicated on statement of good faith. So utmost honesty there, and that's the policies are based on that. So utmost good faith is really what the policies are based on. It's like anything you're answering in your application, it's going to be truthful. And otherwise, the companies, they can go back and say, hey, this wasn't right. They can actually stand off a claim for that.
Mm-hmm.
So we put all that information down. And if they're in a situation where they've got a build time, or they're thinking about this, maybe they're thinking about this 3 years in advance, which is great. They might be able to buy an interim boat and do that. So buy an interim boat, have that for a number of years, and then they can step up into a 54. And they bought a 42 before that. It gets them in that that size jump very easily.
I can tell you, I've got a client who's building a new boat now, who's making a big jump.
Yeah.
What we've done, I believe you chatted with him, but what we've done is we've got him working on his captain's license.
Great.
And I have him working as a mate on every boat trip I can get him on.
Oh, good.
So that he's getting sea time. I'm putting him behind the wheel. I'm letting him drive the boat so that when his new boat's here, he's ready to go.
Excellent.
So
and that's actually logged, right?
Yes, we're logging it. I'm signing off on his stuff for him. So there's a lot of different ways to get there. If you're buying used and the typical process is 30 days, what would you tell us to do?
Yep. In that situation, look at what the client is looking at prior to writing the contract, where he's coming from his ownership and experience, and if he's making a jump that is really just out of the realm, maybe tailoring his purchase to something that's going to be a better fit for him, that's going to actually get him in without having the no insurance or the insurance hoops to jump through that can be very laborious.
Is there a number one offender thing that gets you denied? Is it claims? Is it jumping too much size? Is it dollar value, location? Like, what's the most difficult thing to overcome?
Yeah, it's probably and I'm talking about the Florida markets, but the most common, that is a common denominator with most of the companies, is that jump in size. So 10 to 15 feet. Those are the sizes. 15 with some, 10 with others, and then being able to bring something to the table as far as ownership along those lines. And if you do have a brokerage buyer and it's that 30-day contract window and he's not sure, and he can call us in advance. And we can actually run quotes on something before he puts a contract in. So he can say, hey, here's what I'm looking at. Let's go ahead and look at this market, see what I can pull in before he even puts a contract on the boat.
Does that hurt him, like credit rating, where, hey, you applied for this 65 whatever, now it's going to cost you more if you apply for a 62 whatever or 68 whatever?
No, it doesn't. Okay. There's no credit pull that affects any sort of credit scoring at the just at the quote stage. You don't necessarily want to do that for, hey, let me like 5 different boats. So, be judicious about it. Hey, I'm serious about this. This is what I'm going to look at. And if that boat changes out on your second submission, which is the one you put the contract on, it's no big deal.
And how long does it take from, hey, what about this 50-footer to you give me an answer?
Right. It'll depend on the insured as far as his experience, the boat, and the location. Sometimes it can be quickly as next day. Other times it can be about 3 to 4 days, just depending on the underwriter and the cycle of how they push things through.
Now, the finance guys I had on here a few weeks ago were really big about, you got to fill out your application 100%. You got to be accurate. They talked about how they would talk to the customer during the application process, just to be like, hey, you don't have any nuts hidden away over here or over here. I want to just make sure we get it all.
Yeah.
How do you handle that on the insurance application, or do you?
Sure. Yep. And what we'll do at quote stages, we'll take their information to get the insurance quotations. So we gather a lot of their information up front, provide the quotations, and then we have another consultation, and we come down to and target which product would be best for him based on what he's doing in the vessel and his experience. And at that point, we provide the documents and the applications to complete. And then we'll go through those with the client. We answer questions on the applications and the forms. There's storm plan forms. There can be absentee or caretaker forms, those types of things. But we do encourage completeness of the documents. Be honest, be careful, fill it out in incomplete, and sign and send on in. So yes, you want to be complete about those documents.
We've talked about storms, hurricanes, locations, right?
Yeah.
What can somebody do who's going to be in that hurricane belt, right? What can they do to be proactive? What's some insurance advice for somebody?
Sure.
So, because my next question is going to be the claims process.
Yeah.
So let's talk about how do we avoid claims, right? And then what do we do when we have them? Because it's a 1-2 combo, right?
Sure.
I don't want to talk to you about it. I want to protect I want to protect my claims rating, right? Where I want to have 0 if possible.
Sure.
So what's some things you say to help us avoid that during storm season?
Right.
And then go right into what happens when we got punched in the nose.
Yep, absolutely. So to protect the boat, there's different flavors and different methods to do that, and it can be boat dependent. So, for instance, on the center console type boats, if you've got those inside of a rack, enclosed, high and dry facility that's Category 4, Category 5 rated, you're in pretty good shape. Not much you need to do there, and those are approved by the companies, so you're great.
Are those facilities, Cliff, this question's for you. Are those facilities right now empty and looking for business, or are those facilities full and we need more?
They're full and we need more.
Okay. Yeah. How many more do you think we need, and where?
It's going to be in really any growth area where there's boat purchasing going on and where there's building going on. In Sarasota right now, Tampa, Sarasota, south of us, really all along the West Coast, they're needed. So any area like that is going to need facilities. They've almost all right now got waiting lists from what I understand, and so they can be filled, and it's a matter of finding the right spot and getting the construction in place and doing them.
So I'm assuming you're not in that business.
Correct.
Okay. But if you were to throw a dart at this state and say, where's the greatest need and where's the convenience and most protected area, where would you throw that dart?
Yeah, let's see. I would probably, Sarasota and our area would certainly be one. We could absolutely fill it down in the Venice area. I think we could use another one. I would say over in Palm Beach, we could use one. Lauderdale could always use another.
Does the insurance company care if it's right on the water and look at elevation and storm surge, or do they prefer it to be more inland? Is there any benefit to that?
There's always a benefit to be more inland, and if you can get away from that surge, because with this past hurricane, the bottom rack on those, they were filled with water, and those boats floated up and they crashed into the boats on top of them, so they created damage that way. That's not always possible, because obviously those facilities, you have to drop those boats into water. But if they can be back inside some sort of a canal system and not just a fronting of a larger body of water, that's always more preferred. What they're primarily going to look at, though, is the wind rating on the building.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is there anything man-made that may add value to be behind if one of those buildings were to go up, where one could argue there's a marina break wall, there's a sandbar, there's a narrow passage, there's a lock, there's whatever.
All of that.
Where would the insurance company go, I like that better?
Yeah.
And is there benefit to somebody and a reduced premium by staying there?
There is, yeah. Potentially reduced premium, and in Florida, probably the bigger benefit would be maybe a yes versus a no by an insurance underwriter.
Meaning I could even get coverage.
Correct. Yep.
Right.
Like if it was coastal located and it was in a facility there, for instance, we might have an underwriter that says no, it's too close to the coast. It's at the proximity. But if you go,
and what is that? What's too close to the coast?
It's going to vary. They're going to, again, these are marine underwriters. They look at things from a risk by risk basis. So if they're looking at the facility and it's out on the barrier island, and the barrier island's very narrow, and that facility is there, they're going to look at that and go, that's number one, we're going to have a surge problem.
Let's throw some numbers at it. That barrier island's 6 feet off the ground, and you could hit a golf ball to the ocean.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then we talked about it in our last podcast with Bill. We have an intercoastal waterway, right?
Yeah.
So let's just pretend I found a little canal off that intercoastal waterway that might even be behind a lock, let's just say, an Army Corps of Engineer lock. So now I'm 20 miles.
Right.
Or 50 miles from the ocean. Right?
Yeah.
And maybe my elevation's 35 feet or 50 feet, right? How much does that weigh on an insurance carrier?
That would weigh quite a bit. Yeah, that would weigh quite a bit. So if we've got a natural barrier like that, particularly a lock, which is engineered, and can close during a storm, which they do, that's going to be a much more preferred location than the one out on the barrier island.
Okay.
So, and that's going to be more preferred with a carrier that is looking at things on a case-by-case basis. So not necessarily a zip code or whatever it is. He's going to look at that and he's going to recognize the benefits of that facility. And it may be a company that would say, hey, we're not writing owner-operator in Florida year-round, except if they're inside this facility and they're in there during storm season, we could potentially write that business.
Are there any preferred facilities currently? And do those facilities have to be Cat 3, Cat 4, Cat 5? Is there a Cat 6 rating? What are you seeing as, hey, this is an easy box to check if they're going there?
Right. Yep. Cat 4 really is the level where companies are approving right now. They're saying, hey, if it's in a Cat 4 or higher rated facility, that is good. We have had some companies start to look at requiring Cat 5, and the later ones are Cat 5. Not all of them are, and even the ones that were built, I don't know, maybe 6 years ago, 7 years ago, pretty new facility, Cat 4, they weren't doing Cat 5s really in those days. They're doing those now.
So does that mean that facility now can't put those boats in it?
No, they're still, the Category 4 and Category 5 are still accepted facilities in Florida. The
and
Cat
are those
5,
responsive facilities, or are those generally park it for the season facilities?
Those
responsive being,
sure,
hey, it's coming, we're going to go high.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
What do you see it being?
Yep. Typically responsive. So they're in and out facilities. There are some facilities that are inland that are designed for the larger boats, and you bring them in, but they're in there for the season. They're going to be in there from June to November, and that's it. But obviously you get the protection that's afforded in those facilities.
So I did everything I could do. My policy allowed me to keep it behind my house. I went out there, I double tied everything up, and we got unlucky.
Yep.
What's the claims process? What do I have to do?
Yep. So the claims process is hey, when something happens, and it does, there's multiple ways to file a claim. There's always a direct number and a direct email to the company. And some companies even set up specific email addresses for CAT events. So say for all Ian claims, send them here to this email. We get those in. Or call your agent. We're available. We've got multiple offices. So even if the Sarasota office is wiped out, we've got cell, but we've got all our other offices. And those phones, we just program them to ring, and they'll ring all offices. So there's always going to be somebody available, even if the CAT event is in the proximity of your actual home office.
My insurance company for my home reached out to me after the storm just to say, did you have any damage? If so, call us. Do you do something like that as well?
We do things like that. Yeah. We identify prior to the storm. So we'll send out emails and to clients saying, hey, we got a storm. It's forecast to come into your area. Please double check your storm plan, ensure to carry it out. If you have any questions, call us. So we send one out before, and then we'll also identify and call later. So we may not get to everybody after the storm, just depends on how big it is. Like for instance, this last one, we were not able to, but we'll reach out proactively to people and ask them how their boat is. Find out if they need assistance, if they've been contacted by an adjuster or anybody like that, because the adjusters will come in and they'll actually be feet on the ground.
Now, I believe at my house, if I have an incident, I'm obligated to try to prevent damage, and I'm obligated to report it, right? How does that work on a boat if I evacuate it? So I'm gone, and maybe I can't get back into my location.
Sure.
How does that? I can't prevent damage.
Sure.
How does that work?
Sure. No, that happens, and preventing the damage is you've got to be available, and there's got to be reasonable opportunity to prevent that. If it's a catastrophic event and the client has evacuated because the storm was heading right for them, which is a reasonable thing to do, when they get back in, they can assess and they can start the damage mitigation process at that point. There's nothing that's going to preclude them from coverage in a reasonable coming back and reporting.
Okay.
We've had clients that have left, and they'll call and say, hey, my boat was here. The storm went right over us. I don't know the status, and I'm due in on this day, but
Once I
to
know,
let you
I'll
know.
let you
Yeah,
know,
just
yeah.
to let you know. Yeah.
And
yeah.
do you run that up a flagpole or do you sit on it?
No, we do. We run it up a flagpole, so we will typically have that logged, and then we provide that to the carrier, because the carriers have identified, the carrier is the actual company. Hey, here are the vessels potentially in this area. So we'll typically have a list of those, and then we'll note, okay, unknown damage, client arriving back Friday, whatever it is.
Right. Okay. Now, we don't sell a lot of boats that fit on those, high and dry storage
No.
racks, right? Most of the boats we build, maybe we'll be buying a house in a marina, at a yard, out of the area, or maybe in one of those dry dock storage places.
Right.
Of the last storms in 10 years, if you were to try to focus on our boats, where did they get damage?
Yeah, probably I'm going to say marinas. That's probably the place where you have as least control as you would of any other environment. So
floating docks or non-floating docks?
Non-floating docks, marinas with wooden piers.
Yeah.
Those are probably the most perilous
Okay.
because you've got all kinds of different boats in there, all types of different levels of preparation for those boats, because you have owners that are very good and conscientious. You also have owners that they may not be there, they may not have prepared anything. Or
didn't tie their boat. I remember that it was like 10 years ago. The storm hadn't even started, and some sailboats like drifting away from Key West. That guy had to untie that. Like the wind's not even here yet.
Exactly. So we got all those from the extreme, right?
Right.
So and the thing with the fixed piers in the marina is typically there's not a lot of width. You're going to have to tie the boat to keep it from going back and forth. But you also have to allow for surge. Like in Ike, Ian, we had 14 feet of surge in Fort Myers. So to tie the boat loosely enough to rise 14 feet and not pull the pilings out or pull the cleats out that are tied to the pilings, you're going to have a lot of leeway. And to do that, you're going to be hitting the sides of the pilings. So you lose one way or the other. Floating docks are much better. There were some marinas in Fort Myers that actually were behind the canal systems, inside neighborhoods, concrete pier or concrete floating docks with concrete pilings that were high enough, and they actually performed very well. Very few losses in those marinas because you can tie the boats tight. The wave action isn't coming in, so you don't have that to contend with. You're dealing with wind. As long as the pilings are strong enough, the docks are strong enough, they're going to handle the wind, and then the rise and fall is going to be handled by the floating docks. So those performed. New floating docks not on a big body of water and not with a little seawall, but behind canals, behind an infrastructure, or behind a big bunch of mangroves. Mangroves are great for protection. Those will perform well. The other thing that performed really well that we found in Fort Myers and Cape Coral behind people's homes were slide moors. So if you've got a protected canal, again, if it's protected from the wave action, those slide moors can work very well. And we had 2 days after the storm, 3 days after the storm, pictures of a Celine, which is I think a 68, right in Cape Coral, off a narrow canal right off the Caloosahatchee. And the Caloosahatchee was a disaster, but sent me pictures, and this boat rode out fine. It rode up and it rode back down. The pool cage, the landscaping, everything was trashed, but the boat was absolutely fine. We had the same situation in Cape Coral. Actually, it was a Marlow 70 behind a house, and that gentleman stayed, watched the storm, and the boat rode up and rode down and was absolutely fine. So the slide moor system in a protected canal with high enough pilings has proven very successful.
Okay.
And for large boats.
Good. What are some things, rates, cost, strategy that you help people that are boating in this market that maybe were boating 10 years ago and the prices were less? How can that person preserve their discounts, maybe the way to say, for a long-term relationship with you or an insurance company. So as these markets go up and down, they're not just, getting some sticker shock, I guess would be the way to say that.
Right. Yep. And the best thing they can do to bring to the table is to keep your rates as low as possible in an environment right now where the rates are high and the availability is low, is good track record, your good ownership, and being claims free. And claims free is really the best thing you can do to bring to the table. It's going to bring your highest quality companies to the table for you and at the best rates. And to preserve a claims-free record, in a market like Florida is right now, any tight market, and this applies to other property as well, what you want to do is kind of avoid that small claim.
Just to talk about property right quick, you do both, but do you do airplanes, anything else, RVs?
We primarily do yacht and marine.
Okay.
We do some homeowners. We do some auto on for existing clients. Typically is how we do that. The homeowners is something we're looking to build out, but we haven't yet. We're still concentrating on
just as we speak into how to keep that down. But please keep
absolutely. So this is keep yourself claim free. That's the best thing you can do to keep. Two things you're aiming for there. One is quality of company. You want to have the best quality of company behind you. When you really need them, you want to call a company that's answering the phone and that pays their claims. And then claim free, that keeping your rate as low as possible with that company.
But aren't there checks and balances that don't allow people that wouldn't pay claims or wouldn't answer their phone into the insurance market?
There are, sure. And those checks and balances are out there in the marketplace. We communicate those to clients.
How?
In the types of companies. So there's admitted companies, there's surplus lines companies, and there's higher risk companies. So the higher risk, those will handle things that the admitted top tier companies really will not quote. So that could be older vessels. It could be vessels that are more exposed, say down in the
20
Keys.
Years, you mean?
Older than
30.
It depends. There's a couple of tiers out there for vessels. The most stringent company right now in Florida is not writing anything over 5 years. That's pretty stringent. Mm-hmm. There's another
with a reason to buy a new boat.
That's one reason to buy a new boat. There's another company writing at 10 years. There's another that cuts off at 20. There's some that go up to 40 or 50 or even more. But as you go into that gradation, I guess, if you will, you're going to get companies that are the company that writes 5 years and newer. They're going to have the most comprehensive coverage. The company that writes up to 20 years, less coverage. The company that writes 40 years, there's going to be more exclusions in these policies. Mm-hmm. So that's how they're classified. And typically they'll go from admitted through the progression to non-admitted.
What's something that might be excluded as an example on a 40-year-old boat that wouldn't be excluded on a 15-year-old boat?
Yeah. One would be resulting damage. So on a new boat, resulting damage could be something that, for instance, if you have a part fail, it could be a through hole, it could be a clamp, it could be a stuffing box, a rudder stuffing, whatever it might be. It lets water into the boat and the boat swamps. Your higher quality policy, if it provides resulting damage coverage, will provide coverage for the result of that damage. So the water intrusion, they're not going to pay for the gasket or the hose clamp, but they're going to pay for the swamping, which is the big part of the claim. The company that's higher risk will hold that and as an exclusion under a seaworthiness clause. So what they would say is vessel must be seaworthy at all times. And that's actually a common requirement of all the policies. But they will hold to that in a strict sense. So if something happens to a hose clamp and the boat swamps, by definition, the boat's not seaworthy because water let in, they can deny the claim. And that's a big deny because once water gets into a boat, it's a big loss already.
Right. Yeah. Understood. So those company ratings, do you have a boat now currently?
Yeah.
Are you only with the top tier? And let's just say you went bigger. Is there any tier you would definitely not cross over personally?
I am with a top tier company. I would, in the Florida markets, I would go with obviously the top tier companies. I would go with there's products called programs, and those are managed through a managing general agent that the company will approve, and then the company underwrites it, like a Sutton National. That's an example of a program. They're A-rated, very good company, very good claims. So that is one I would go with. I would go with a non-admitted carrier with a good product and a good claims department. There's a product that we work a lot with that we know the claims department. We worked with them for 12 years, 10 years, so we know how they work and we know the product. I would get a little more reticent in getting into fully offshore products, that the claims handling would be done offshore versus over in the U.S. that's a higher risk product.
Mhm.
The claims process gets slower. The communication is less quick. It's not it's just not as good, and they're going to be more on a strict interpretation of the policy.
Mhm.
You can also get into, and even below that, you can get into policies that are what they call unauthorized, and those are unauthorized insurers, and they exist out there. There's some security out of in the past out of the Eastern Bloc countries. I think it was actually Ukraine. There's some actually in Central America. There was one actually in South America, and they write under a name that's administered out of a program name, but typically they're going to be domiciled in places like the Caribbean or someplace like that.
You help
like
the
a
client
Caribbean island.
navigate that.
We
You
do.
put the rating into words so they can understand the risk.
Correct.
I think it's a fair way to
Correct.
explain what I've seen you do.
Yep, absolutely. And really what we want to do with a client is we want them to be aware of what they're buying. So if they buy into the high risk market, they buy a high risk policy, and they may buy it for a reason. It may actually be necessary. But if they know what it is and they know what they're not covered for, then they can manage their own risk, and they know going in what's going on. Or the middle one, or the top tier. But whatever it is, based on those values, they've made a conscious choice. So the thing we try to avoid is a client purchasing a policy and just thinking everything is the same, because they're not. Particularly in boat insurance, contrary to maybe popular belief, like an HO3 policy, that's a common regulated policy across all kinds of different carriers for your home. In boat, all these contracts are written by the actual companies. They're all custom. They don't adhere to a guideline like that's across a rating agency. So they're all different. So buying a product over here is very different than what it is over here. So we try to let them know that, and then they make a decision as far as, hey, we totally understand what we're buying. We're buying for these reasons, and they understand that. And that's a good purchase on their part, because they're buying with knowledge.
So I'm going to ask you a question that might not be answerable,
Okay.
but I think it's our last question. We've covered a lot of ground today. We've talked about, how you got into the industry, talked a lot about the state of the industry, hopefully offered some value add to those of you out there thinking about either your current vessel's insurance or your next boat's insurance or your dream boat down the road, wherever that is. But let's talk to the person that might be 3 years out.
Yeah.
Right. Either they're liquidating their business 3 years from now, or they're building a new boat next year, which is going to take a couple years to get here.
Yeah.
What do you think the future of the industry looks like?
Yeah. The industry is cyclical. So right now we're in a very, very tight cycle. They call it a hard market. So that's when capacity is low, rates are high, and demand is high. So there's very few participants in our market. And again, I'm talking about the Southeast, but particularly Florida. So it is tight. And what happens is, if we get a year or two without major storms, what that does is insurance companies are always looking at areas and opportunities, like any business, to make money and to come into a market. So they'll see a high rate. They'll see they haven't had any claims. Our competitors are making a lot of money off of this line of business. We want to get in there, so they'll create a product and come on in. So if we get an environment where this holds, the rate holds, and the losses reduce, that's going to bring some companies into the market. And when they come into the market, they're typically going to come in a little bit lower than the others. And then that's going to create a competitiveness where the others are going to maybe have to respond from a rate standpoint or a capacity standpoint, start writing more than what they were writing before, maybe loosening their criteria, and that causes the market to expand. So it's a cycle. We've got to get to the point where I think the companies want to see yacht insurance become more predictable from an actuarial standpoint. As I mentioned, avoiding those shock losses, being able to predict. Because if they can predict and their predictions are better as far as their profitability, frequencies, and severity of losses, they're going to be able to bring in more investors. Right. If there's wild swings, those investors are going to stay away.
How long do the good times need to roll before their insurance companies say, I want back in that market? Because I was told last night by somebody who knows everything, which is my significant other, that we
That's
are
a good source.
We are in I think she said El Nino year, and that is traditionally a very low, knock on wood, hurricane season. Right. So let's just pretend that's all accurate and true.
Yeah.
Does that mean next year they're coming back looking to get in the insurance market? Does it take 2 years, 3 years, 5, 10? What does it take?
In the way the market is right now, I would say if we had a good hurricane season this year, I would expect an entrant into the Florida market by January, February. So I'm going to say 1. If we go to 2 years without storms, we might see 2. We might see 3.
Okay.
So it will happen. What can help further that along is facilities that can protect boats, bring them inside, a better protection for the vessels than leaving them at the dock and putting double lines on them. Right. So places to take them, places to put inside.
Or technology we don't know of yet that'll be even better than what we talked about the Tide Wars, or whatever it is. Right?
That's possible. Yep.
So
yep.
Put your thinking caps on. Help us fix our problem.
Absolutely.
Right. If you're an insurance company, come to market. We've got a lot of good boats, a lot of good customers. And if you're a developer or a builder, we need some more in-house, places to park luxury motor yachts. So is there anything else you'd like to say today, Jerry?
No, I think we've covered just about everything, Eric. Sure appreciate the opportunity to get a little information out there insurance-wise, and it's a pleasure to serve this market. Insurance is a necessary, and we're happy to provide it, and happy to help clients get into boats that they can enjoy and feel confident that they're covered and have peace of mind while they're doing so. We
really have a family here at Marlow. You're a family member. You've been coming to our rendezvous for a long time. You help my family members when things go wrong. You help them problem solve, figure out ways to get that boat that they want insured. Maybe they have to have a captain for a period of time until they're signed off on. Maybe they have to buy a smaller boat, but we seem to figure it out.
Yep.
So
Yep.
I thank you for your time. You answer your phone. I appreciate that. You're responsive to our customers and clients. So I really, you're 10 out of 10 in my book. So thank you.
Well, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
All right. Well, thanks for joining us today. Let us know if there's anything else you would like us to cover in another podcast, and we'd be happy to do so. Our contact information will be put up on display. Reach out to us. We're here to assist. Thank you so much. Thanks for joining us at Everything Yachting. I hope you've enjoyed diving into the yachting world today. If you've enjoyed or learned something, please subscribe to my channel and stay tuned for more. Until next time, my friends, healthy families, happy memories, and may fair winds and smooth seas guide your future yachting adventures.